So we are joined today by 5 Wasatch veterans, veteran runners, 4 veteran finishers, and 1 who is paced and crewed. And our first guest is one of my favorite people in the entire world. He's got 7 Wasatch finishes. The guy, he's got a 26:30 finish. He is one of the most efficient Wasatch runners that I know. And Steve Newman. Steve?
Hello.
Steve,
Yes.
I would like you to tell the camera people something that you nailed at your first Wasatch 100.
Okay, that one's pretty easy. So I had a really good mentor named Philip. Taught me to run by heart rate. So I ran my heart rate, kind of like lactate threshold analysis, and I killed it on my pace. It's pretty consistent the whole way. Felt pretty good. And that was probably one of my most exciting things. First Wasatch was 2012 for me.
And what was your finishing time?
29, maybe 29:40 or so, I can't remember.
Yeah, that's phenomenal because you were pretty new to ultra running,
Yeah,
right?
I was pretty stoked.
Okay, so Steve, what is something you failed or something that you really had to learn with your first Wasatch that you took with you and you've used through the next 6 that you ran?
Yeah, well, nutrition, I failed at a bit. I was trying to only eat goose the whole race, and I'd learned that later on in the race, even if you're having a lot of calories, you're going to starve because you don't have protein. So I started to learn to, after my first, maybe eat a little more solids at mile 70 or so.
And what were those solids?
Well, I like chicken noodle soup, and I'll say the Brighton aid station had some of the best tasting hash browns and sausages I've ever had. Might be because it's that time of the race. Well, I'd say it's the aid station. Mark Coleman, I'm not sure if he still is the chief of that one, but anyway, that kind of thing. And then I also learned that, when you have stomach issues, that Coke is like heavenly, right?
Yeah, I know several people that have said the same thing. And I do feel like with Wasatch, figuring out your gut is one of the most important aspects to the race.
Right.
Okay, Steve, now over your next six, not sex, 6 Wasatches. What are some of the things that you have learned that you have gotten better at that now you incorporate, just things that you've had to learn along the way, if you were imparting wisdom to a new Wasatcher?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I learned is to have faith that you're going to have 1,000-second wins. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but after first couple of hundreds, you're shocked how your body can run that far and how it can handle things. And so I like to call it like an induced state of manic depression when you run 100 sometimes, where you have some high highs and a few low lows. And it's in those lows where, a lot of times you have the highs until the heat hits you, which probably starts getting hot around sessions pass, right? And then it gets hard to eat a little. And then finally when the temperature starts to cool down, hopefully it's cooler once you're going up lambs, and you can get a second wind there, and you can get, and then when the sun sets, I usually get another second wind, and then 3 to 6 in the morning, it's kind of miserable. You're tired of running in the dark, and you're just physically tired. and all of a sudden that sun comes up, and that is another second wind, where if you can hang on to that, see, maybe lucky enough to be there to see Tim, sun rising on it, those are exhilarating. And then the last 5 miles, where somehow, for me, I get another second wind, and sometimes you can
Smell
sprint.
the barn.
Yes, and when I say sprint, that might be 8 to 11 minute miles, but it feels like sprinting, and it's so amazing. So,
And Steve and I literally had a battle, one of our Wasatches, where I was right behind him the last few miles, and he outkicked me to the finish.
yeah, it's amazing. So I'd say 1,000 second winds. I'd say preparing for the heat. So my first Wasatch is 2012. The heat year, I believe, was 2013 when it got up to 96. And I did not know how to run the heat. And now I do. It's all the little things. Run with sunglasses, what a radical concept. Covering your arms, covering your head with a buff, taking enough salt so you don't cramp, wet washcloths around your neck. All that is super important. Plus heat training. Now, I'm a guy who, I don't train like do back-to-back long runs and a lot of speed work because I'm a little lazy. But I do believe in heat training. The benefits only last about 3 weeks before, and maybe 2 or 3 times a week, running in the heat. Maybe some sauna training. That gives me so much confidence in myself. It can increase your VO2 max.
I'm just showing the view, not trying to cut you off.
Oh, no. It's awesome. So
yeah.
I'd say heat training is huge.
Yeah.
And then one final tip is I've fallen 3 times on the scree hill right before Aunt Knowles.
So after Brighton,
yeah.
you do the climb out of Brighton and then going down. It's one of the most horrible descents. It probably is the most horrible descent of the whole race, especially because of the condition you're in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And then another one. Oh, I got one more tip, and then I'm done.
All right.
But that is aid station time. Obviously, you really watch it. The heat year Wasatch is my hardest Wasatch is like 33, almost 34 hours. It's like 4.5 hours in aid station time there. And my quickest, I think the goal is to shoot for under an hour.
Yeah.
Of aid station time total.
Yeah.
So
we are very, very excited to finally have a special guest that is not from the male persuasion. We just had too much testosterone on this series, and we are going to change that. And so we are joined today by the lovely and talented and very accomplished ultra runner who's done several hard ultra runs, Mrs. Daisy Newman. Daisy, welcome to the series.
Thank you.
So Daisy has paced and crewed Wasatch. She's been around the race. She's a local. Daisy, if I asked you what's something that really surprised you or you learned from your experience on the course during the Wasatch 100?
Okay, so yes, I haven't raced the Wasatch. I've paced the last 30 miles, and I've
33.
33.
Your Steve's up here.
I don't even know the distance that's said. And I've run a lot of those sections. But I would say those last 20 or so, well, 30, there's some really technical trail, and especially if you're running it at night and on tired legs, you're going to want to be prepared for that. And whether that's with poles or just being able to, know the technical with tired legs, whatnot. And then those last 10, 15, what is it, on the kind of road of just winding
Yeah, you got 5 on that Deer Creek, and then you have, prior to that,
So that, I say mentally, just working through those where every turn feels like you're almost there and then it's not.
That's a good point, because I feel that every year.
Prepared for those little sections where it is runnable, and so whether that's in your training, those end of your runs, trying to get that runnable stuff in that sucks and you hate, but it's good for you mentally. So yeah.
All right, we are. I gotta show these views. This is incredible. State of Utah. We've just got so many fantastic places to run. I've got a tickle, an incredible tickle. I'm not going to go into too much detail there, but because of our next guest, this guy, he is an amazing person, an amazing, incredible individual, very handsome. He's run and finished Wasatch. Actually, something that I've learned doing these videos, saying Wasatch finish is kind of a tongue twister. Say Wasatch finish.
Wasatch finish, Wasatch finish, Wasatch finish.
Good job. Okay, the lovely, super talented, amazing Carl Duke. Carl, welcome to the Good Water Rim Trail and running the Wasatch 100. Carl, that was way long-winded.
Great to be here.
Can you tell us something that you absolutely nailed, did really well in your Wasatch finish?
Yes. So first of all, I'd like to go back to me being handsome.
Yes.
And that part of the introduction.
We can focus on that.
Just like to touch on that quickly. So the thing that I did right was my first pacer at Wasatch. Wonderful guy. Took time out of his day. Knew I needed help. Obed Leduc came over and paced me from Big Mountain to Lambs. And frankly, my guess is, had I been exposed on that section alone, I never would have finished it. He had the experience and the wherewithal to really slow me down, get me rehydrated, get some food in me, and frankly saved my race.
Yeah, that is the most, in my opinion, the most critical section,
right?
And will make or break your race.
You get that section wrong, and it's hard to pick up the pieces and salvage a race. We've seen so many runners go through there, talented runners,
yep,
that don't make it out.
Exactly. What is something that you failed? You had a big fail, and something you learned from it, but you went in, it surprised you, or you just had a fail?
So my entire race, I really felt was going great until Brighton. And at Brighton, something happened to my lungs, and I was never able to get it back. My lungs became inflamed, and I had a hard time even maintaining a walking pace on the flats.
Was that a smoky year or a dusty year?
Dusty year.
Okay, because we do get a lot of smoke and dust at times.
Yes.
And I've had the same problem. So continue.
But that one just about did me in. I should have had an inhaler. I should have packed an albuterol inhaler to open up my lungs.
I'm gonna concur with that, because that's what it's probably saved my Wasatch on some of the smoky years or the dusty years.
And have you noticed, Scott, like there are a lot of ultra runners that run into respiratory issues long term.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and I just feel like, especially Wasatch, the time of year, and if we are having a heavy fire season, or if it's a real dry year,
yes,
you get a lot of dust.
Yes.
And if you're middle to the back of the pack, you might have to deal with a lot of dust in higher traffic areas, and it'll come back to really haunt you later in the race.
So that was one thing that I did wrong. The other thing that I did wrong is I didn't run fast enough or long enough. So.
You mean your training, or?
No, just in the race.
Oh, you didn't.
So if you're running Wasatch, you should run faster and longer than I did.
Yeah. What's some advice that you would give to somebody running Wasatch for the first time? They're going in as a virgin.
That's easy. Find a group of friends to train with. I'm not an antisocial person. I need people. And frankly, as I look back on Wasatch, all of my best memories were with all of my friends leading up to the race itself. And let's be honest, that race sucks. It's hard. But every morning leading up to it, being in the mountains with my friends, I wouldn't trade that for the world.
I am incredibly delighted. I would say downright tickled for our next guest. So our next guest is a multiple ultra running finisher, 100 miler, second place at Moab 240. He's done the 350, is it the death race? What is it? No, not the death race.
Heart of the South.
Heart of the South. He's got, I think, 3 or 4. How many Wasatch finishes?
I know I quit from one.
Okay, but you've done several.
Yeah.
Mr. Jeremy Suwinski, he does not like the limelight, but he deserves it. So this guy knows what he's doing. He knows Wasatch, and we're very excited. Jeremy, welcome to running the Wasatch 100. I've got a couple questions for you. First one, what is something that really surprised you about your first Wasatch, or that ended up being really difficult for you? That was something that you learned, and then your subsequent races and Wasatches, you were able to learn something because it sucked, or was really hard, or you did wrong, completely wrong.
Yeah, so I think, Wasatch was my first 100, and I think for me, because I was so scared, I came into it with low expectations and a game plan that, I made sure I was drinking, had my pacers lined up. I was very meticulous on the strategic side, and it was just to finish. It wasn't to do well. But I think because I was so scared, I respected it, and I lost that respect after. And I think that was my detriment after the fact. Like, my best Wasatch, both time-wise, I think, and enjoyable, was my first. And every other year, it was shit, to be honest. I mean... Yeah,
and why do you think that is, was?
I think, to be honest, I think it's ego.
Yeah.
I think that I would come into it and think, well, you've done this before, or you've whatever. But reality of it is, every mile deserves respect.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it's 1 or 100. If you don't respect it, it's going to get the better of you.
Yeah.
And I think I just lost that respect.
Something that you nailed in your first Wasatch, or you did really well, something that you've carried with you through other ultras where you've been successful?
I think for me, what it was is, the last half. Like, it's easy in the first half to really get down on yourself and think, well, if I feel like this now, what's it going to feel like in 40 miles or whatever, right? And if you're at mile 20 and you're already feeling pretty crummy, what's mile 40 going to feel like? And for me, knowing that, like, in that first one especially, the last half felt great and it felt amazing. And I got to the finish line and I felt like I could turn around and go back. And I think that just knowing that, you know, that those first few miles, it doesn't have to paint the whole day. Just let it paint those miles, let it be done with, and then move on.
Wasatch is known for the heat, being a hot race. What do you do to mitigate the heat or to prepare for it? Or
good question. Yeah, I definitely, back in my early days, I just avoided heat, and I paid for it pretty bad. And that kind of led to my only DNF at Wasatch was because of the heat. But even for races that aren't necessarily known for heat, I still do sauna training just because I think it helps you get in this meditative state where time slows down, you know, your heart rate's ridiculous, and you really have to kind of talk yourself through it. And I think it helps to build that mental strength, plus whatever it does physiologically for heat. But I definitely think there's a benefit.
What does that look like when you're in the sauna? You going in there with like all your clothes on? You going in? It's just more about being in that heat. And
I try and build up. You know, I'll try and go every other day, and then
every other day. Like how soon leading up to the race?
I'll go. So basically, if I start a training block of 4 months, I'll do it all 4 months.
Oh, really?
And then like 2 weeks before, I'll cut it out because I want to conserve that. You know, like your normal taper. I won't during taper. But the heavy weeks, I'll build it up to about an hour. You know, if I can get it up to an hour in the sauna, I feel like that's as much as I can do.
Yeah. Is there anything you do, like clothes or gear, ice, to mitigate during the race for heat?
I mean, definitely stock up on ice at the aid stations. Don't underestimate like what that feels like. You know, put it in your bladder to warm your back up, especially if you got a pack on, because your back's gonna get pretty warm. Sunblock is good, and don't hesitate to look stupid. Like, cover up, right? Like, who cares what you look like? You don't need to look fast. You just need to get there.
Yeah.
So, you know, wear stupid hats or wear whatever works, but don't underestimate how much the sun will beat you up.
So if someone just got into Wasatch and said, hey, Jeremy, what should I do? Or what's something that really I need to prepare for? What's the piece of advice that comes to mind that you would give them?
My advice, well, probably a couple things. Rock bottom is a lot lower than what you think it is. And the other thing is none of us really know what the fuck we're doing. So don't get beat up or beat yourself up when you start feeling bad and other people are doing better. Just do you. Just do what works for you. And that is the absolute only thing that you can do.
What specifically to Wasatch, as opposed to other hundreds and ultras you've run, is something that you think is different that people need to prepare for?
So basically any section that they name it for a reason. So don't take it lightly. And the 7 hills or whatever of Babylon or whatever it is, it's more than whatever the number is. So don't bother counting them. You'll get done when you get done.
Yeah. Bow-bearing Hill.
Yeah, exactly.
Is actually pretty horrible.
Yep,
So,
all of them.
Yeah. Can you give us your take on, so it used to be the dive and the plunge. Now I think it's the glide and the, I don't know, it changes. But a lot of people talk about this section of the course. It's horrendous. It's dusty. It's like running through chalk that's super steep. What is your take on that section of the course?
I think they're right? Like it's not a fun section, but the good part about that part is you're at that part and you're not 20 miles back, 50 miles back, and you only got to go through it. Once you're done with it, you're done with it and you're on to the next one. So if you can just look at it like at least you're at that part, and there's always somebody behind you who's not, so at least you're not them.
Yeah, that is a great way to look at it, because I have always looked at that section like, felt sorry for myself, and it's just a mental mind screw. And this year I'm gonna look at it that way.
Yeah,
I'm gonna be like, I'm almost done.
Exactly.
And that's gonna refresh my parts more than anything else at that moment and get me to the end of the race.